By the power of Grayskull, I have the power of pep talks. Let's talk about Masters of the Universe.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So today we are going to be discussing or debating Masters of the Universe. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is. Movie recommendation time. I'm actually surprised that I'm about to mention this film for you guys to go and watch. Well, it's a new movie and it is called Scary Movie. I'm surprised. I'll be honest with you. Scary Movie, I've liked scary movie films. However, I've liked them on the same level and I see them kind of like the same type of film as Scream. Like Scream movies aren't scary, and quite frankly, Scream movies are kind of rubbish, but it's the good kind, the good rubbish. And this new scary movie is really like it's really fun. Like it's fun rubbish. I think the reason why I found it so refreshing is because you don't really see those type of films that kind of like cross the line a lot of the times because of cancel culture. So with this one, it felt like watching a movie back in the day. Obviously, I wasn't watching these type of films back in the day when they came out because I was too young, but I'd watch them on, the DVD when you buy the DVD from outside Sainsbury's, the pirate copies. I've seen it from that, so it just gave me that feeling again when I was watching this movie. It was fun to watch. Of course, it was very immature. However, it wasn't like it wasn't too overbearing. There were points where it did kind of get overbearing. However, I think they managed to reel it in with moments that they had throughout the movie, and there was a lot of moments that there'll be a moment for you in this movie. Definitely there'll be a moment for you in this movie. And if no one knows what scary movies is, then it's just kind of like a parody of all horror movies. Whatever horror movie was popular within, I don't know how many years ago it could have been, but yeah, they definitely referenced Get Out, they referenced Sinners, there was a whole bunch. Wednesday, they actually called it a Tuesday in this film. That was funny, but yeah, it was. I would actually recommend it. It was a fun watch.
The trailer looks pretty obnoxious, and I think the only funny thing is about how it refers to Michael Jackson as the musician who touched his fans. It's kind of funny.
They called it Jerome.
Yeah, but it's clearly Michael Jackson, right?
Yeah.
And every other aspect of the trailer looks really obnoxious. So is the trailer representative of the whole movie? And if it is, it's just taste. Like it works for some people and not for others. Basically, what I'm asking is, if you thought the trailer was lame, are you going to enjoy the movie?
I don't think you will. However, like I said, there's a moment in there for everyone. So I definitely feel like there'll be like moments in this film that you like. However, as a whole, and if you want to go and spend your money on it, if you thought that the trailer was whack, then I don't think you will have a good experience with this one. But I still stand by you having, there will be moments in this movie that you'll like, but it just depends on what type of person you are when it comes to movies. If you're someone that, can still, appreciate a film because you liked a moment or two in the movie, then I'll still say go. But if you want the whole film to be a film where you're like, okay, I want the movie to be good as a whole, then I'll say, okay, no, don't go.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. All right, Hervé, what's the best recent thing you've seen?
What have I watched? I actually watched the first episode of Spider Noir, the new Spider-Man series on
Yeah, I saw that.
Amazon Web. Actually, I watched it in black and white, and to be honest, it was actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And I'm not really sure kind of what I was expecting kind of going into it, but I quite dug sort of the vibe that it was giving. I quite dug sort of the aesthetics of it. I feel like it's got an interesting kind of like setup and story that kind of, positioned him in a semi-interesting place where you're kind of curious to kind of see where it goes. And obviously it's Nicolas Cage, so he's notably older as a spider person than, what a Tom Holland or Tom Maguire was, or Andrew Garfield, etc. So it's just kind of like a different look, a different kind of take of this different universe as well. I thought it was interesting. I definitely need to check out more to kind of see where it goes, how it develops, and if it holds my attention for the rest of the first series.
Yeah, I watched the first 4 episodes and I couldn't get into it. Like, I like the production values, I like the character, I like kind of how it looks and feels. I just could not get into the story. And I don't know, maybe I was in the wrong mood for it. But I don't know, I just could, like, I was waiting for it to get interesting. Like they're setting stuff up and they're introducing characters, introducing backstories, introducing conflicts. It's like, okay, can you get to something interesting? And it just in those 4 episodes, it didn't come for me, which was a shame. I'm really starved for good superhero stuff, and I was totally on board with just like, this is just a different kind of superhero story, but it's still like somebody's still like solving crimes. Like, when was the last time a superhero solved a crime in the modern era? So I was totally on board with the basic idea. I just bounced off it, and I hope I'll rewatch it again at some point and it will just click because I like the idea of it a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I'll try to give the episodes a go as well on my end, because I think we're kind of like similar in terms of liking the visuals of it and like the feel of it. How many episodes are there in total? Kind of like I'm just kind of hoping that all this kind of setting up and building up that they're doing leads to something that pays off really well.
Yeah, I think it's 8 or 10, something like that.
So still room for the story to kind of come together.
Yeah, but after 4 episodes, if you haven't done anything interesting, I'm not gonna give you more of my time. It's kind of my philosophy. Like, you have to do something interesting, like in the first hour.
Fair. Okay.
It could be a me problem. I've seen a whole bunch of people say they really like it, but I gave it a shot and it didn't land for me. So this week I watched Koala Man, which is a 2023 animated superhero comedy show about a guy who lives in a small town in Australia, and he's Koala Man, who basically fights very suburban and very mundane crimes. And he basically gets drawn into this bigger story about the show kind of sets up 3 or 4 different stories, and within a few episodes it is revealed that because of the time difference, Australia is actually 14 hours in the future, and so they can interact with the past because they are 14 hours ahead of the US, and that is how an Australian psychic prevents the sinking of the Titanic. And that sets off a chain of events in which America is destroyed, Hollywood is an island, and Australia is the only superpower in the world, and Nicole Kidman is Queen of Australia. So that is kind of the setup. And then in that setup, they seed kind of 3 or 4 different storylines that over the course of the 10 episodes or so are actually all resolved, and they all come together in like a big climax. And it's very Australian, it's very funny. I don't think you need to know very much about Australia to kind of get the jokes, but if you know just a little bit about Australia, like there's little Easter eggs and little gags, but it explains the important stuff. It's got a whole bunch of Australian and New Zealand actors in it, like actors, comedians. So you'll recognize a whole bunch of people in this. On Disney Plus, there's a whole bunch of animated comedy shows, and most of them that aren't Bob's Burgers or Simpsons or Family Guy are complete trash. Just over the last 10 years or so, a whole bunch of people tried to make those kinds of shows, and almost none of them worked. And I expected not much from Koala Man, but it actually kind of comes together. And the main thing about this is that it's got likable characters, and it's got funny jokes, and it's got storylines that actually have a beginning, middle, and end. And over the course of the 8 episodes, you get a complete story, actually multiple complete stories. On that level, I was pleasantly surprised, and I did not expect this, but I got much more than I bargained for. So that's my recommendation of the week.
Cool. Okay, cool. It looks like it's time for the main event. Masters of the Universe. Daniel, can you please do your thing?
So Masters of the Universe is a fantasy science fiction toy commercial which follows the story of Adam, who, as a young boy, fled from his kingdom when the evil Skeletor took over his parents' kingdom. He grew up on Earth as just a normal guy, and when he is reunited with some of the people he knows from his home realm of Eternia, it turns out that he has the calling to return to Eternia and fight the evil Skeletor to restore the kingdom. In the course of that, he has a number of adventures that teach him lessons about heroism and a few other things, and the story then unfolds from there. So what did we think of Masters of the Universe?
I think my opinion might be different from used to. I will say I was surprised because I found this film very entertaining. I actually like the movie. Of course, it's not a great movie. It's not going to be in my top 10 of this year, that's for sure. And it's definitely not going to be a movie I'm going to watch again. However, for what I got in the cinema, I think it was like a 141-minute runtime. I think I got my money's worth. I enjoyed it. I think that was one of the best fight scenes I've seen, I wouldn't say in a very long time, maybe in a very long time in these kind of movies. Like obviously this Master of the Universe is kind of like in the same realm as Mortal Kombat, Borderlands, you know what I'm saying? Those type of movies. And the fight scenes in those look very fake. Whereas this one, the choreography was great. The CGI was great. I think I just enjoyed it. I had a really good time. I enjoyed it. I'm not here to defend it, but I enjoyed it. It was entertaining. The storyline itself was pretty, like we've seen it before. So there wasn't really anything, even like the whole relationship dynamics and the story arcs with characters and the interactions, it was all done before. So there wasn't really, so I'm not here to compliment the story itself or the script itself. I'll be honest, it was just the fight scenes that I enjoyed watching. And I think the storyline was pretty basic, but I didn't mind it. I really didn't mind. I was like, okay, this is cool. And yeah, what I hated though was the costume. It looked so plastic. That's what really pissed me off. And when I watched the trailer, I wasn't looking forward to this film whatsoever. Because when I watched the trailer, it just looked like generic garbage. I said to myself, Lord have mercy, I do not want to watch this movie. That's why I was really surprised with what I got. So, like I said, the story itself is simple, is generic. That being said, the entertainment value and the tone of the film, sounds like it's very comedic. That was a surprise to me, especially with what's his name, I forgot his name, the villain, Skeletor. I love that guy. I'll be honest with you. I was not expecting him to be that type of villain. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of the comedy side of things when it comes to serious tone movies, because obviously this is like a serious fantasy movie. However, the tone in this film, the comedic tone they added to this film works so well, especially with Skeletor. He was the guy. I really liked him. Like, I was like, even his aesthetic look was really great. I really liked him. I'm not familiar with Masters of the Universe. I think this came out in the 80s. So I went in this as, this was like my first time being introduced to this world. So I would watch a second one.
Okay, so for me, this was a bit of a roller coaster ride, I would say. I actually quite like the initial setup when we're in, I forget what the place is called, this Skull Island, whatever. I think it begins with Eternia, yeah. When we're in Eternia and they're like setting things up, and they're showing us kind of a younger version of He-Man, etc. Yeah, it's a little bit goofy, but actually I thought it was okay enough. I thought it was a decent introduction. And then for about the next hour or so, it turns into like the stupidest, silliest, worst version of a comedy I've ever seen in my life. And I was like hating every single moment of it. It was just so painful. And it was clearly like meant to be a kid's movie. It felt like. And my issue is like I watched it kind of like midday, so there was a bunch of kids in there. So I tried to like see if the kids even liked it, and no one was reacting to anything. So I was like, okay, I don't know if they've dumbed it down. Again, I'm not familiar with the show or the history of it, what it's something about, what the tone's meant to be, etc. So I don't know whether it's intentionally like kind of matching what it was previously, or whether they've kind of gone in a new direction. I have no clue. But it just felt like it was just way too silly, way too goofy, way too forced in moments to try and get a laugh out of the audience that just never came. And then I kind of just found myself starting to enjoy the movie after the initial like thing starts to calm down. I think it's like after he becomes like He-Man the first time or so. There's still like silly moments in there, and there's still like really goofy moments. But I actually found myself like not hating the movie anymore. And actually I was like, I'm kind of having an okay time with it. So it was a bit like up and down with the movie. I agree with Jonathan. Like anytime Skeletor was on screen, I thought he was like head and shoulders like the best thing in the movie. As someone that roots for the villains and likes a good villain, him being pure bad was like cartoonish, but it just worked such a treat. And like his lines, there's like one line where he says, anyone that approaches, kill him. And then he was like, the women and children, kill them first. And I was like, this is perfect. Like it's stupid, but it was just like perfect. Just like some of the stuff that you were saying. It was still there. Some like the dumb comedy was still there, but I felt like it was like a little bit more toned back in the later parts of the movie, and I could kind of find myself enjoying a little bit more of some of the action and some of the, I would say like character. Like, do you know what, some of the like choices maybe with some of the characters and like the journeys that they went on. Like I kind of understand what you were trying to do. Do I like the portrayal of it? Probably not. And do I like the way it was handled? A lot of like the exploration of like themes of like parenthood and stuff like that. It's too played up for laughs, and it's not taken nearly as serious enough or done in the right way or blended in the right way. Kind of came out of it. I'm not really sure what to make of the movie. Would I ever see it again? Probably not. Just because I think it's way too childish. I enjoyed Madagascar. I enjoy like loads of other kids' movies. I just felt like this is like you're making it for really dumb kids. Is kind of what some of these gags were for.
All right, so this might be the worst movie I've seen so far this year. It's absolutely unbelievable. So I'm not nostalgic for He-Man. He-Man was old when I was born. This is not something I grew up with. I'm not one of the 80s kids who really cherishes their sensation of being 7 and watching He-Man on TV and being enchanted with the world and whatever. I'm not like that. I knew about him, but I knew very little about him. And so I kind of walked in kind of just wanting it to be good, but expecting very little. It cannot make up his mind whether or not it's serious, like a serious epic, or a complete farce. It cannot make up its mind or what its characters should be like or what the movie should be about. It constantly switches tones. It makes jokes at all the wrong places that aren't even funny. There's a lot of cringe in this movie, but not in a way that makes a point or should be there. It's just uncomfortable to, like, most of it is just uncomfortable to watch. Anytime characters are talking to each other, I was cringing and squirming in my seat. And then when the action broke out, that was very clearly made by a different crew. right? Like it didn't feel like the same movie. And almost all of that action was very generic. You have a bunch of fighting and punching and shooting and running and explosions and chases, and that's about it. Like there's very little here in terms of stuff where I said, oh yeah, this is just cool. This is just what the cartoon wanted to be and never could be. But now we can put it on screen. Like there's nothing like that in this movie. There are individual lines and individual character designs that are kind of neat. But that lasts maybe 3 seconds and then somebody has to make a dumb joke. The story, I didn't expect much from the story. It just needs to be Skeletor wants to do evil and Human stops him, right? Like that's all that's really needed. But even that is barely there. And what surrounds it is just a collection of references that nobody in the audience gets because they're not 50, and jokes that don't land. And anytime you start caring about somebody or somebody approaches coolness, it's immediately undermined. So every piece of this, like I was actively fighting my fight or flight reflex from about 20 minutes into this movie. And I think I agree with Herbie that it gets a little bit better when they get to Eternia because everything in our world is just awful. Every single line, every single scene is just agonizing to watch. And it gets a little bit better, but then it never quite approaches watchability, in my opinion. This is a very expensive pile of nonsense. It's like a first draft. It's like a dare. It's like they wrote this. I don't even have a joke ready. Like it's that bad. The entire script just feels incredibly rushed and surface level and half-assed and phoned in. And it could have been so much more. And it could have actually been something that kind of reignites people's love for these characters, or it could just be fun. And it's just not. Let's talk about it.
So you thought this movie was worse than Mortal Kombat?
Honestly, yeah, I was not as physically uncomfortable watching Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat was just not great. This was actively assaulting my senses.
I felt like we watched two completely different movies because both of you guys said, yeah. Because one thing that I disagreed with both of you on was the whole you lot said it was goofy and the tone was just, I'm saying, pretty much goofy, and two, like, I'm saying, the jokes and stuff weren't really funny. Well, that's more side on you, Daniel, but Heavy did mention that too. For me, I felt like it had the right amount of humor. For me, like, I would associate that opinion with Marvel movies that we've seen recently, or the most recent.
The entire movie is Marvel humor.
No, it had moments.
Can I quote? I've got a list. Skeletor, I forget the exact context, but I think he takes over Eternia and captures Castle Grayskull. And he gives a big epic villain speech, and he just starts laughing and shaking his fist in the air. And then everybody stands out awkwardly, and he just pauses and says, "When I raise my fist, that means I'm done." And then Evil Lyn says, "Yes, my lord, we will know for the next time."
Nah, that was funny, Daniel. Can I tell you why that was funny? It's because I wasn't expecting that. So that's what I'm saying. I wasn't expecting the tone in the movie, especially from Skeletor. That's why for me, I was like, oh my God, I was just caught by surprise the way that in that moment, what he did. I thought that was funny.
See, I've been watching Marvel movies for the last 8 years, and they are all like this. Every time somebody, like, nobody's allowed to be cool in this. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is inherently silly. Like, we've got a guy called Mossman. We've got a guy who punches people with, like, who uses his neck as a flail. He's called Mechaneck. They can't shut up about how funny the name Fisto is, right? When you have characters like this that are clearly based on some hacks in the 80s coming up with toy designs and then coming up with a story that barely holds together, right? Like, that's what this is, right? And we've got a thing called Mossman and Pig-Boy and Spycore, and Trapjaw is probably one of the cooler ones. Ram Man, he's a man who rams. That's the source material. That's what this is working with. And if you want to make this, not believable is the wrong word, but if you want people to buy into this, it has to take itself seriously. It cannot undermine itself every 5 seconds. Like, these characters have to take themselves seriously. Like, if you actually just watch some clips of the original cartoon, it's not like the cartoon is like the gold standard for anything, but Skeletor is incredibly campy in this. And he's like the most mustache-twirling villain you've ever seen in a Saturday morning cartoon. But he takes himself seriously. And so does everybody else. And so the silliness and the ridiculousness of this works because they take themselves seriously. And here, nobody takes themselves seriously. Every time they kind of approach that, somebody has to make a joke. And it's a bad one, too.
I don't know. For me, it just works well. And for me to say this should mean something because, like I say, I'm not really a big fan of comedy in general. Well, I don't mind comedy, but I'm not a big fan of mixing comedy with, serious tone movies. I'm pretty much against it. Whereas with this one, Like I said, I wasn't expecting what I saw, especially from Skeletor. I thought his humor worked so well. I don't know why. I just think the way that he was introduced, I wasn't expecting that. And I just didn't see Marvel in this. I saw, fragments of Marvel in it. However, I just think that, like you mentioned before, the tone switched a couple of times. And I thought that really worked well. Like it was serious at moments and then jokey in moments, serious. Like it was going back and forth. And for me, that worked well because I think with Marvel movies, is literally just goofy throughout the whole film, which annoys me. Whereas this one, it switched back and forth. And I said, that's a good balance.
I was going to say we're putting way too much slander on Marvel at the moment. The way that you're comparing Marvel movies to this, like, yes, Marvel has like goofy and silly humor, but it's actually funny in Marvel movies. It's actually sort of kind of witty. It's actually done in the right way. I think there's only a few examples of Marvel movies where it's gone too far. Like this movie, like Daniel was saying, it's too much. It's too silly. It doesn't take itself seriously whatsoever. It thinks it's come up with like the greatest fisting joke that they won't shut up about throughout the whole movie. It's just like, it's almost to a point where like each character is like extremely dumb or it's like stupid. Like when he turned into He-Man, there was one where I was like, he's meant to be the guy now. He's meant to be something a little bit more. And I get you could still like put some comedy through him, but when he like falls out of like the ship that he's in and he hits like multiple tree branches on the way down and then he hits onto the windscreen of one of the sort of kind of bad guy ships as well. And I can't remember exactly sort of how the rest of that played out. But it's just like you're making him look like an idiot in his own movie. I can't imagine a kid stepping away from the movie being like, oh, I really like He-Man. I want to be like He-Man. He's just an idiot in his movie. And even that one where he lands on the windscreen, Marvel has done it before in Infinity War where Thor, after Thanos destroys the ship, Thor hits onto their screen and then like the Rock is like wipers. It's not the funniest joke, but it still works in a way and it kind of like then leads into them like bringing him onto the ship. And then they have that whole monologue where they're just like thirsting over Thor in that sequence. And it just works so much better in Marvel. So I just really don't like the comparison between Marvel and this movie because like Marvel is, if we're talking about like this type of comedy, Marvel is the standard and this doesn't come anywhere close to sort of what Marvel's been able to do in their movies. But Skeletor though, just kind of quickly while I'm kind of going on, Skeletor though, we take no Skeletor slander. Because like the moments, Daniel, that you were saying he was awkward in or like whatever, I thought it was just like moments where clearly he's just like way too drunk on power and like he has like too much authority and like people just don't know how to like react to him or how to like kind of like interact with him, and they 1 minute kind of blowing smoke up his butt, and then others they're like completely terrified of him, and then others it's just like awkward, but he's literally just doing whatever the hell he wants just because he can do it. And I think it's just like his charisma and his like energy and like his presence on the screen, which is like so much bigger than what anyone else is bringing onto the movie, that just makes him stand out a lot more and makes what he does in the movie work a lot better. Even the laughs, because like there's that meme where it's like Skeletor but the cartoon version, and he's laughing and he runs away, and like people obviously like pair it with a bunch of stuff, and I just know Skeletor from that laughing meme. And just like hearing him do like some of the laughs in this was it's like they knew that meme was a thing, and then they just tried to make him laugh as much as possible. And every time he did, I absolutely loved it. It was great.
It's not that it's all bad. It's more like it's so inconsistent, and every time it approaches being interesting or being fun, they do something lame. Is my problem. And the thing about the Marvel humor, I think Marvel in general does it better, but it's the same formula. It's the same strategy. And I've been tired of this since like 2018. Like I remember walking out of Thor Ragnarok angry because I realized, okay, like these are gonna suck for a while, because I did find it funny then, and it's the exact, like we're here 8 years later and it's the same thing. And that is kind of why I'm reacting so negatively to it, because in 2016, 17, 18, that was kind of fresh, but it already was starting to wear thin, at least on me at the time. 8 years later, it's just not bearable. Like I'm not in the market for that kind of humor anymore at all. Like if Marvel does it, even if they do it well, I roll my eyes at it. And if this movie does it poorly, I'm even less charitable about it.
I'm so confused how you guys are saying this one, the humor in this one was actually worse and more than the average Marvel movie, when He-Man was the only thing comedic about this movie, whereas where everyone around him was serious. Of course, they had their moments, but it wasn't as much as you will see in a Marvel movie. It's like the main character as well as others are on the same level, or maybe some might be just a bit under the main character's level when it comes to goofiness. Whereas this one, it was only He-Man that was the one that was like the representation of being goofy. So that's why that's why I'm a bit confused on what you guys are saying in terms of this was way more stupid than the average Marvel movie in terms of, you know, just the jokes and the goofiness. I'm like, that's what I'm saying. I felt like we watched two completely different movies. I was comfortable with what I was watching. And I said, this is not too much. Of course, the way He-Man was acting, he was goofy. What balanced that out was everyone else around him. They were serious, especially what's her name?
Tila is 100% serious, and she's also really boring.
Oh my god.
I honestly did not find anything likable about her at all.
One of the worst characters I've ever come across. Honestly, she was so jarring.
Well, what was she supposed to be? Was she supposed to be mixed race, or was she like fully white? Because I was a bit confused how Idris was her father.
So in the original source material, I kind of, first of all, in general, I like it when stuff makes sense, and like, and if family members don't look like they're related, that kind of takes me out of the movie, because I'm realizing that's not a story reason, that's like a casting reason, right? But she is adopted. Like in the original cartoon, she was adopted.
They didn't make this one clear though. They should have did that, because I wasn't
Not in the movie. They don't say it, no.
Yeah, I was a bit confused. So, okay, now, what I will say is the reason why I think He-Man especially was so goofy was because they were trying to modernize this. Because like you said, this was like in the 80s, right? So they had to kind of like find a way to balance it out. Now, for you guys, clearly that didn't work. Because like you said, Dan, you mentioned a point about how you're kind of like over this type of 2018-17 Marvel type of humor, right? So I hear that. But I just think they just tried to balance it out. That was actually going to be one of my questions. Like, how do you guys think that they did? And in terms of like making an 80s movie relevant in today's day and age?
So I think, first of all, I think the problem is that the main character is such a bumbling idiot all the time. Most Marvel characters are not like this. The humor is a little bit spread out more even across the characters, and everybody still gets to do something cool at some point. And Adam, after he becomes He-Man, he's kind of a bumbling idiot because he doesn't know how to use his power. And before he's He-Man, he's a bumbling idiot just because he is, right? And I think the worst scene was when he gets a tip on where his sword is, and it's been used as a prop in some kind of game store. And he just walks in and just starts assuming that everybody is a secret contact. And it's so cringy and it's so unnecessary. I just wanted to leave at that point because this is so stupid, and I'm not here for it, right? There's some guy who wants to sell him like the information of where his sword is, and he just walks in and starts talking to everybody in the shop as if they're his contact, and it comes across as if he's hitting on them, which is kind of, we're doing a gay panic joke in 2026, which is already not a good start. But then he finds the sword, and he just tries to pull it out of like the action, like the statue's hands. And it turns into another gay panic joke where the statue tips over and looks as if he, like, I don't know how to put this delicately, but it looks as if this statue is assaulting him, and somebody is recording it from just the right angle to make it look suggestive. I'm sorry, like, is this like a stoner comedy from 2007? Then he causes a whole bunch of chaos and runs away with a sword, and then the shop assistant runs after him asking if he is single. And this entire scene is like 6 or 7 minutes. It's awful. Find some other way of him getting the sword. Make it even a funny misunderstanding or whatever. But that scene is just a microcosm of it's so uncomfortable, and it's so tedious and annoying, but in a bad way that it makes me want to watch a different movie.
That is crazy. I enjoyed that sequence of what was happening in that store. I just didn't think it was too much. I'm just a bit, I'm confused. I said I wasn't going to defend this movie, but I'm just a bit in shock and thrown a bit back by what you guys are saying right now.
First of all, the whole thing is contrived. He doesn't need to find his sword. Like, that entire subplot is unnecessary. He can still have the sword, but he doesn't have a way of getting back to Eternia. And then when Tila arrives, that's when he gets the call to action. Like, you could have cut like those whole 15 minutes where it's this giant man-child who just Googles swords at work all day because he's so obsessed with it. Like, none of it makes sense, none of it is interesting, none of it is funny. It made me just want to skip to the next chapter kind of thing. And you asked earlier about what should this have been? Like how do you make a He-Man movie in 2026? And my answer is Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim, most ridiculous movie ever, over the top, colorful characters with ridiculous names, but everybody takes themselves seriously and everybody gets serious character beats. And so you care about the characters, and because you care about the characters, the silliness is more fun. That is what this should have been. It should have taken the epic fantasy sci-fi angle and just played it completely straight. The badass heroics completely straight. Skeletor is campy, yes, but he's like a mustache-twirling villain who's a real threat to Eternia, and he really needs to be defeated. And He-Man really needs to learn how to be a hero so that he can defeat Skeletor and whatever, right? Like everybody else is like the coolest version of who they are. And then I buy a guy called Ram Man or Fisto, and then I would have liked them. That's what it should have been.
A lot of the stuff just kind of took weird leaps, or like was just like stuff that didn't make sense. And yeah, I get it's like maybe more of a kids movie, but like something like him not having like any like, social cues or like social awareness, like he's on a date with a girl and all he can talk about is like this magical land, when clearly he knows that they're not going to believe it. Like it's going to be like so far-fetched. But she asks where he's from, and many because he went there as a kid, so he's clearly sort of grown up, gone through school, functioning enough to be sort of working now. But this is where the movie's like jokes over logic, because in that situation it's not logical for him to do that. It makes no sense for him to be explaining it like that. But because they want to get the joke off, they would rather sacrifice that than actually sort of focus on the story first, and then like sprinkle in some of the jokes over the top. And then again, it's like everyone in Eternia is an idiot, because how do you have a full-scale invasion where Skeletor and his entire army has come and has like completely taken over the place in a matter of minutes, and there was like no warning system, no scouting, no pre-warning or anything like that. It was just, oh, they're here now, everything's been blown up, we need to sort of send He-Man away. And I get it's not like the biggest point of details, and it's not going to like change the way that the story goes, but it's just like the logical steps of getting from A to B and some of these things, or like how some of the characters are interacting or operating, etc. It just doesn't make sense. And then I'm just there questioning the logic in many things in sort of what I'm being presented with, which then kind of leads me to not having a good time in the movie. And like anytime I wasn't having a good time, it was when things like that were happening, when it was just like, it doesn't make sense. Like when He-Man and his mum just run past Skeletor and his entire army and are allowed to get away after they've captured the king. And it's like, what we're presented with of Skeletor doesn't really seem likely that he would allow that to happen, but they just run, no one goes after them. And I was like, okay, we need him to get to Earth, but could you not have thought of a bit more of a creative way for us to do that, as opposed to just, yeah, the bad guy's just going to let the king's son leave, and maybe one day the king's son's going to come back, and you already know what impact that might have. So a lot of frustrating moments like that in the movie.
Yeah, it's hard to care when everybody behaves like this, right? And every scene is written like this. I think there are scenes in this that could have been more funny and more lighthearted, but I think the big conflict with Skeletor should have been serious, or at least in a way that creates real threat from Skeletor, and that makes kind of the sequence, like this whole scene, right? So Duncan does say they have a palace guard who is trained for this, but they lose in about 2 minutes. And it just amounts to people just standing in an open field shooting at each other. I think we've said this a whole bunch of times, right? Where if the villain is competent, that makes the victory of the heroes much more rewarding. And consequently, if the villain wins, like in the initial attack on Eternia, if the defenses are actually competent and good and effective, that makes Skeletor a much more threatening villain if he still succeeds, right? If he succeeds in spite of those competent defenses. And everybody just having these extended scenes where Adam refuses to leave his mom behind, and they have this long conversation about how he has to do what's right and he has to be a hero one day and whatever. And Skeletor is kind of just there waiting for them, politely waiting for them to finish their conversation, right? It just does not feel real, right? Like they just shoot it in a different way where Skeletor is like 2 minutes away, and so they have a 1 minute conversation about this. And then Adam goes through the portal, and as the portal closes, Skeletor and his goons come around the corner. There's a way of shooting the scene that is less contrived and that is just more fun to watch, and where the threat is more real. Like same story, same beats, same characters, just shoot it in a way that's not lame. It's just what I'm asking.
It just kind of adds into how certain like moments in transition were like poorly handled. I thought everything about Idris Elba's character was just an absolute like mess. It was almost like infuriating to watch. Like again, I think you mentioned that like He-Man was the only kind of goofy thing in the thing. No, like Idris Elba's character was equally as dumb, as bumbling, as like much of an idiot. And then you add like the pairing of like him and like Warrior Woman or whatever, like they ended up calling her at the end of the movie. Like you mix the pairing of like him being an idiot and her being like such a flipping wooden cardboard box throughout the whole movie, and like them just having like the worst dynamic between the two of them. It was like literally any time that either one of them were on screen, it was just like nails to a chalkboard, up until they kind of like took his character and made his character a little bit more fatherly figure to He-Man. Funny enough. And they had like some like good moments between some of him and He-Man, but everything to do with him and his daughter was just painful. And there's a way to do a tough soldier that loses it all, has a significant loss, and maybe sort of loses their way a little bit and recovers. There's a way to do it. I just think that the way that they tried to execute it in this was just a complete mess. And again, that's part of the moments where I was just like having an awful time with the movie. In that sort of like hour stretch where they were like being way too goofy with it. And he was like a big part of it as well.
And like that ties back into this idea of nobody's allowed to be cool, right? Like there's, like you say, there's a way to make the grizzled veteran who has descended into being an alcoholic, because the one time he really mattered, he failed. And as a result, everything has gone to hell. And he's just not been able to handle it. And the hero then wakes him up from that slumber, right? And brings out the best in him again. Like there's a way to do this in a way that's cool. And I think he's just pathetic for 90% of the movie. And the other 10% are the action scenes that are in their own, like that they basically are their own movie. I don't feel like those two really fit together as well, which is kind of important, but that's maybe a slightly separate point. But my question here would be, what 8-year-old? So actually, like in the ads before the movie in my showing, there was an ad for a He-Man toy, right? Like one of those play sets, right? So they would like to bring back the He-Man toys, right? And I was honestly put aback a little bit because I'd not seen a toy commercial like that in like 20 years. It just does not feel like something out of the current year. But there are He-Man toys and they would like to sell them. And that is part of why they're making like a Masters of the Universe movie. But what 9-year-old wants to, like, one of you said this earlier, probably Hervé, like what 9-year-old wants to be He-Man after this, right? Why would you? There are no characters in this that are just cool, like in the eyes of a 9-year-old. I don't think there were any children in the audience in my showing. There may have been some in others, but I don't think there was anybody under 30 in my showing. And even if there were 9-year-olds, why would they like this? Like what's there for them? What's appealing to them? There's like a couple of shots, right? Where I think towards the end, when He-Man gets on his lion, who I think it's actually called Cringer, I'm not sure, which is the funniest coincidence in all of this. But like some villagers call for help, and so he transforms into He-Man and he rides off on Cringer into battle, into adventure, right? And there's like a shot where he raises his sword and the lion or the tiger just does this, I don't know, like standing on its hind legs, kind of heroic pose. And that's like the coolest shot in the entire movie, right? Where I say, okay, yeah, I see the appeal of this now, but why is this like a 2-second still frame in the entire movie? Why are we not getting badassery the entire time?
You are right. I don't think they should have made toys out of this one. Maybe it could be like seen as a collectible for adults, because how I took this movie wasn't really a film directed at kids. I just thought it was going to be a nostalgia fest. So for them to release toys, I don't think no one's going to want to be, no kid's going to want to be He-Man after this. Because watching He-Man, I'll be honest with you, it did feel like a superhero that you would see way back in the day. You know, the typical blonde, blue eyes, muscles, you know, stuff that he was saying. I forgot his, you know, sword pose and the actual something. I forgot that speech that he gives before he gets the power. But it felt like this was the type of movie, you know, the generic Hollywood type of movie that you would see way back in the day, I'm saying, when it comes to their superheroes. So I will agree. I can't imagine any kid wanting to be like him. However, like I said, I thought this was just more so of a film, you know, for nostalgia, a film with history, but they tried to make it universal. So they tried to make it liked by everyone. Well, even though it did end in a way where there was going to be like an expansion of the universe and it would have been a sequel, I just didn't feel like this movie had that purpose to try and make He-Man into a significant figure again.
But they're setting up a She-Ra spin-off, right? Like there's like a mid-credit scene where She-Ra appears and she's the other big character, right? Who carries movies and shows and whatever. And I'm just asking why, like, first of all, if this is for nostalgia, why are you rubbishing the entire concept all the time? Like, why are you not pandering to the people who fondly remember at least the idea of the cartoon in the 80s, or the comics, or there's been various shows. The last one was just a few years ago. So there's a general baseline interest in this franchise. And I think if somebody had just done like a fantasy epic that maybe has some fun with the cheesiness of it all, but broadly delivers a Lord of the Rings type of experience in terms of how it feels, like moment to moment. And then you kind of jokes in there, and you have kind of cheesiness in there. And Skeletor still has insane villain monologues and whatever, but it's still like a real heroic epic. And I have a feeling like that would have resulted in people walking away from this feeling really good about He-Man and saying, yeah, finally somebody got it right. And then you can build on it with spin-offs and toys and collectibles and whatever else.
Mm. But to be fair, they did try to make this universal. So there was nostalgia in this, but it still had to kind of like tick other boxes, such as the box of modernizing it. So, you know, if they were just heavily reliant on what people remember of the film, then I don't think, well, actually, who knows if that would have been better.
Yeah, but I just don't know who this is actually for. Like, is this for the fans, but then you're not giving them what was appealing about the original IP?
It's for everyone.
Are you doing? But I don't think so. Like, just I don't see how a general audience likes this.
No, I'm not saying they do like it. I'm just saying I believe its intention was for everyone, because if it wasn't for everyone, they wouldn't have added the whole goofiness or the comedic tone to this movie. Is He-Man a serious cartoon?
They take so it is very campy, very corny, and is clearly made for children. But the characters themselves take themselves seriously. They're not bumbling idiots. They're not making jokes all the time. The plots themselves are pretty standard fantasy hero stuff.
But when it comes to these type of movies, goofiness and, you know, the whole trying to be funny, that is clearly, in terms of like Hollywood, that's clearly their view of us in terms of what works for us. I never thought that, but it's what made money back in the day. And I think they're still stuck in their ways because obviously they've seen the performances of these type of movies recently and it hasn't really performed great. I don't agree with them making these type of movies always funny. Even though this movie worked for me, I don't agree that, you know, this is what works for us. But to be fair, I don't know the general audience, because I see movies, but like, for example, Project Hail Mary? I'm still not a fan of that movie, but people love that film. I don't really know what the hell's going. I don't know what the general view is when it comes to cinema goers. So, but they clearly think this is what this is how you modernize a film, is by making it, you know, stupid and goofy.
The difference about Project Hail Mary and also the good Marvel movies is that you have this kind of humor, but the hero still gets to be a hero, and the threat is still a real threat. And the villain, if like Hail Mary doesn't really have a villain, but like if there's a villain, there is still a real opponent. And people are not bumbling idiots. They just say funny things as they're doing the heroic thing. That's the difference, I think. I never liked Marvel humor. Like, it was briefly funny for like a year or two, and then it got old very quickly, and then they continued another 10 years. I've been annoyed by it for a long time, but people around me in the cinema always laugh at it. So that clearly hits a nerve, and it's what people like. But I think the problem here is that it's just that, right? Like, it's just the bathos, which is like the undermining of the serious moment, and it's making people look like bumbling idiots and sort of thing. That is the problem with it. Like, that was not necessary, and that is just taking it a few steps too far, because it makes it hard to care about anything.
I had a question though, because even though I've been for this movie, I did mention this in the beginning, was the costume designs. What did you guys think about that? I'll start off by saying I flipping hated it.
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it looking kind of plastic, because it's this franchise, right? I don't want every movie to look like this, but if any movie looks like this, it's gonna be this one. It needs to be paired with a certain amount of seriousness, and then you can pull off kind of we have a character named Evil Lynn, right? Like, that's dumb, that's stupid. But because she takes herself, actually, Evil Lynn, I think, is one of the better characters in this, because the actress plays it completely campy, but the character takes herself seriously, right? She's not an idiot exactly most of the time. And I think all characters should have been more like this.
Evil Lynn was Skeletor's right-hand woman, it seemed it was. It's actually very rare for a movie to show a man kind of physically abuse a woman as much as Skeletor abused Evil Lynn in this movie. And I don't know whether that was like to kind of play up to his villainy or whatever, but like, anytime it happened, I was genuinely shocked, because you just don't see it, especially in a movie like this, which is kind of more kind of family friendly, family orientated. I was just shocked at how many times he put hands on that woman.
Yeah, but he abuses everybody, I think, is why it doesn't stick out as much. Like, he abuses anybody who has disappointed him, or who has failed him, or even just anybody who's lost to him, right? I think that's part of it. But yeah, like a lot of the time movies will try to avoid that if they can. All right, one other aspect I wanted to bring up is if this movie has any theme to it at all, it's the idea of masculinity, right? Because He-Man is like one of the most macho character designs you can ever have. He is an HR person, which is probably the most female-coded profession you can be in. Like, he's completely timid and completely beaten down by his awful boss, right? And he then has these fantasies about being a prince and being a warrior and saving the world. And he tries to be more masculine, and he just can't cut it, right? We have this gym scene where he tries to get in shape and he just can't do it. And then once he gets to Eternia, I think Skeletor says a few things about masculinity as well. And Duncan gives him these speeches about what it means to be a man. You have this hyper masculine aesthetic, but it's constantly winking at and undermining or ridiculing this idea of masculinity at all. But then it involves two dudes with bare chests punching each other, and good is done by the good guys being better at punching people, right? Things like the HR culture is portrayed in a very unsympathetic light. It's completely ridiculous. It's completely vacuous. It's completely pointless. So, like, any thoughts on that? How this movie handled them? Is the movie actually about this, or are they just sprinkling in some things in order to make the movie seem deeper than it really is? Well, what's your thought on that?
Are you trying to say is the typical?
I don't know what the typical means, but
obviously you talk about male masculinity, like the typical things that we would see when it comes to male masculinity.
So it talks a whole bunch about masculinity and what masculinity is for and what it is and when it's good, when it's bad. And I'm just not sure it really adds up to an actual story, because one of the aspects for it is that He-Man does not appear to have a real character arc. He does not really seem to learn anything where he changes, and because of that change, he is able to win in the end. So he's a very timid, borderline effeminate guy in the beginning, and then he kind of just from one moment to the next turns into this ripped macho guy. But it doesn't change his personality at all, and he doesn't seem to need to learn any kinds of lessons from Duncan or from anybody else, and he kind of just becomes the warrior he always wanted to be, but it doesn't seem to be connected to a character arc. And then the movie keeps saying things about what masculinity is and what it's for, in a way that I think is kind of sprinkled on top, because they are uncomfortable with just making like the macho man just be the hero. But at the same time, that's what they have to do because that's what this franchise is. But then they also sprinkle in things that kind of seem to suggest that that is wrong. But then anybody who says it's wrong gets kind of disproven like throughout the story. But it's not wrapped up in a story, and I don't think the movie actually makes a point in that way. It's kind of my impression as I was watching it.
With He-Man's character, because in the world that he was in, fighting was kind of like a representation of what it is like being a man. However, with He-Man's character, he was a talker, he was a resolver through his words. What they were adding to the whole masculinity topic was He-Man was a representation of you don't have to fight. Sometimes fight with words. When they were locked in prison and they had like a talk, like a gathering, I think they did definitely have comments towards that topic, which was you don't always have to use your fists, is, you know what I'm saying, try and talk it out. Even like with, what's the villain's name? He-Man tried to give him, he was like, listen, let's not fight. He tried to resolve it with words.
But it never works. He goes to this well a few times of, hey, let's just talk this out. And this whole HR thing of, we're going to do some conflict resolution and we're going to do some active listening and all of that. It never works and always ends in a fight. And the fight is how you win and defeat the bad guys. It happens when they're trying to escape from that hideout, and they're on that bridge, right? And Lockjaw is trying to kill him, and he says, hey, let's talk this out. And then it ends up in a fight, and he just literally rips off the guy's arm and throws it off kind of into the chasm. And that's how he wins. And then at the end, when he gives Skeletor a chance to de-escalate and to resolve their conflict with words, right, by talking it out, Skeletor just laughs at him, and then He-Man says, okay, I tried, so I'm gonna punch you now. And then we get like a 2-minute montage of him just letting loose and just punching the crap out of Skeletor with no reserves, no holding back, no nothing. So I'm just saying, like, that you could have created a story in which Adam has a very simplistic idea of what a hero is and what a warrior is and what a prince is. And then over the course of the story, he learns things or learns to apply our 21st century Western ideas, right? Of no conflict, always talk things out, whatever, right? Just talk about it and understand the other person, and then conflict goes away, right? He could have brought that to Eternia and that breaks the tie. Like, you could imagine like a subplot where he gets a whole bunch of henchmen to betray Skeletor because for the first time he just listens to their grievance and why they support Skeletor, and once he understands them he can make them a better offer or explain why Skeletor will not solve their problems or something, right? Like, it would not be hard to come up with something where talking it out actually works and actually wins the day. And it does not happen in this movie. Every conflict in this movie is resolved by fighting. And which is not a bad thing. Like, that's kind of what we're here for when we're watching a He-Man movie. But I'm just saying the movie keeps saying, like, it kind of tries to have its cake and eat it too, right? It kind of, on the one hand, it looks down on kind of the simplistic macho idea because that's kind of the legacy that they're stuck with, right? Because it's like an 80s toy commercial, right? And on the other hand, they also rubbished the feminine side, which is let's talk about our feelings. It cannot make up its mind. It does not have a clear thesis. It does not construct its story in a way where it actually says something about that topic, like what constructive masculinity actually looks like, right? Like, there's like this one monologue from Duncan. It's about like, it's when you stand up for the people you love. But it's like one scene and it's not baked into the story as a whole. Outside of that, Adam or He-Man just does generic hero stuff, which involves killing the bad guys. You know what I mean? Like, when you watch it, it feels like that's what the movie is about. But I'm just saying it doesn't deliver on actually telling a story about that actually has a point at the end.
Okay. Like I said, I'm not here to defend the story because I did say it's pretty generic. So yeah, I don't have issues with that.
And I'm just saying it's annoying, right? Because like, while you're here, make up your mind about what you want your movie to be about and then tell a story about that. And this whole flip-flopping and talking out of both sides of their mouth and playing the safe thing is honestly like just annoying, and it's kind of pointless and just a waste of space, in my opinion. Update the idea of He-Man to the 2020s by all means. Right? Like, to do that if you have an idea, and then actually do that, and then we can judge whether that works and whether that's interesting.
I'm not gonna argue with that. So is there anything else anyone wants to add on, or?
I just wanted to add one last thing, which is I went into this not knowing much, if anything, about the lore of He-Man, and actually after watching the movie, I actually watched a little bit about it, like some summaries, and it's actually not that bad. You could absolutely have done something with this. You could have told like a real story that takes kind of the trappings and the ideas and the characters from the 80s and kind of just updates them in a way that is actually cool and actually resonates with people today. Like, it did not have to be this way. That kind of makes all the little callbacks, like the fact that He-Man's mom is from Earth and is stranded in Eternia and became queen as a result of that. That's from the original cartoon. And that is mentioned here, but it does nothing for the story, for instance. Or the guy who gives him advice in the gym is the actor who played He-Man in the 80s movie, which is, I guess, a neat callback, but it also doesn't do very much of anything, right? So the point is they dig fairly deep in the lore of He-Man to the point of giving him the pink shirt. He had that in the original cartoon, but they don't do anything cool with it. Like, He-Man is fundamentally silly, right? It is a toy commercial. It is written by hacks. The world building, the names, the characters, character designs are all incredibly silly, but I think there's enough there, and there's enough there that appeals to people that something could have been made with this. And I think that is the part that annoys me a little bit, that this did not have to be as much of a waste of space as it ended up being. Like, you could have taken all of these ingredients and modernized them and kind of reimagine them as something that works today. And the fact that they didn't even want to is kind of a little bit upsetting.
I will add on to that. I don't know why, like, if you have good source material, why dumb it down? Is that like a thing where they think that the audience, this is kind of like, this script is a reflection of the audience in terms of, I wouldn't say our intelligence, but they just think we're dumb like that, so we'll accept some BS like this and the good content, original content that we do have. I don't know what it is. I just, for me, like I said, I find it weird where there's good source material and you don't use it and you actually use something else, which is dumber. They've done this in many, many movies and it's still happening, so I don't get why. I'm not arguing about He-Man because, like I said, I do like He-Man. Well, I do like Masters of the Universe. I don't know what the source material is like. This is in general my point I'm making. They always do this where they dumb down the source material to a simpler and just not an entertaining storyline whatsoever. So I don't know if it's a thing where it's kind of like we should take that as an insult because, say, this generation, this is what they can handle. Well, yeah.
No, but honestly, it's the creators, like the writers and the people who made this, who decided it should be this way. One of my examples of this, of the potential this has, is Trapjaw, Trapjaw is a silly character, but he is one of the few who doesn't make a whole lot of jokes and who is not turned into like an idiot. He just takes himself seriously and is a real threat. And all the scenes that he's in, like all the fights, are like they're not great, but that's because it's a not great movie. But like I think if the entire movie had been more like this, like the Trapjaw scenes, then I think this movie would have worked so much better. And that's because it kind of took this hokey character design and said, okay, how can we make this cool? The problem is they only did it in like one or two places. They didn't do it throughout the movie, and that is what they should have done. All right, any other thoughts, or should we wrap it up?
Last thoughts, I will say I was entertained. This for me was I got what I paid for. I was happy with my experience. Entertaining fights. I think one of the best scenes I've seen was with He-Man and Skeletor when he was beating the crap out of him. Actually, even before that, when He-Man went up against a lot of Skeletor's henchmen. I had a great time in terms of its entertainment value. Storyline was cool, decent. I think the comedy for me worked. So I'm gonna give this one a strong 6.5 out of 10. A solid 6.5 out of 10.
For me, I think they kind of like shoehorned themselves into a direction with this franchise, which I don't think that they needed to, in terms of like how silly and how goofy it is. It kind of detracts from a lot of like the positive things that were in this. Because like again, I quite liked a lot of the visuals. I quite liked Skeletor a lot, even though they killed him in the end. And I thought there was like enough pieces in there for them to potentially have made a great movie, but they've kind of fallen well short of that, in my opinion. Just a lot of like personal frustrations with how jokey everything is and how like unserious a lot of things are in the movie in the wrong moments. It's not probably done what it needed to, for me anyways, which would be to kind of like make me or bring me on board into this universe. I don't see this as a stepping on point. I see it as a sidestep around it, and I will go find something else to watch. Is kind of where I'm at with it. So with that, I'll give it 4.5 out of 10.
So for me, this is just a giant waste of space. I think the movie's about nothing. I think the humor is misplaced and undermines any attempts of real characters and anything that's worth caring about. I think the action is generic. I think it looks fine for the most part. Like the character designs are probably the best part of this. But just as a story, just the way it's told, like everything about it is just actively awful. And I don't think I felt as annoyed about a movie as I did with this, right? Because like even the other movies I didn't enjoy watching this year, I said, okay, like this is what they want to do, and it's not for me. I don't like it, or I can critique it in this way or that way. But this was actively grating, and I don't think it has to be this way. And I think it's just a massively wasted opportunity where they could revitalize the story for a new generation, and they just didn't, because I don't think there's anything here where anybody can be genuinely excited about it. So that's a 5 out of 12.
All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's episode.
So if you made it this far and you liked what we do, please tell a friend. And if you hate what we do, please tell an enemy.
All right, guys, we'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.